So last week, NIO Stock was up 0.55%, down around 5.7 on the month and about 15% in the last 3 months. And of course, most importantly, last week, NIO reported its Q1 earnings. And how did the stock react? Not bad. There was a surge up to around about 392, a low of 335 before it closed for the week around about where it opened. So in this video, I'm going to talk about last week's price action and how it was impacted by the earnings report. Let's take a look. Now, if you find value in my analysis of NIO Stock or other stocks on the channel, please subscribe to my email newsletter where I'll send you trading tips to help you make more profits trading stocks. I'll leave a link in the description below. Check it out. So last week, NIO reported its Q1 earnings, and as expected, there was heavy losses. But it didn't result in the stock being sold off heavily. On the contrary, some buyers came back in last week and bought up the share, and it actually ended up closing around about the same price as where it opened. So you can see last week it opened around $3.57, went up to $3.92. The low was $3.35 and it ended up closing at $3.63, so pretty much where it opened. So based on that price action and the price closing where it opened, it does suggest there's a little bit of investor indecision between the buyers and the sellers. And based on NIO posting heavy losses in their report, I think that's quite positive because the stock was not sold off heavily. So overall, based on last week's price action, the investor sentiment seems to be neutral. So looking more closely on the daily chart for NIO at last week's price action, we can see that on the Monday, price fell slightly. And then on Tuesday, the day that NIO reported, price opened low at 340, traded up to the key level of 360. It got rejected a little bit and then ended up closing on that day around about 353. However, on Wednesday, a lot of buyers came back in and clearly saw value in the NIO stock. Perhaps it was because of the sales results. I'm not sure. There was buying activity the day after NIO reported. And then to close out the week, Thursday and Friday, price didn't move that much. And it actually closed on the Friday above the key level of $3.60. Mixed price action last week, but there was no heavy sell-off based on the earnings report. So I think that's positive. So back on the weekly chart, and we can see that the current price of NIO is trading just above that key level of 360, which does appear to be a key level of support for this stock. And I say that because in previous months, it has found support, particularly back in here in April 2024. It bounced off that level and moved back up. And also it hit it twice in August and also around about, August 2024. And there was a big counter trend back up to around about 774, which is sort of highest previous peak. So since then it has fallen through and found support at $3 and moved back up. But it's at the moment it's come back and is sort of teetering around this 360 level. So from 360, where could the share price go? At this level, there appears to be two options where NIO could go over the next few months. And that is upwards to challenge 445, maybe $5. And obviously it could fall away back down to challenge $3 at this support level here. So it's trading now in between these two levels and it could go either way. Of course, the third option is it just trades sideways as buyers and sellers battle it out for price dominance. Now, let's not forget, there is a strong long-term downtrend still in place for NIO. So if price does rally from this level of 360 and pushes up, it would be a counter trend and price is more than likely going to get rejected around about $4.50 or $5 before coming back down perhaps to test 360 once again. So that's one possible scenario, and that short-term trend would align with the longer, stronger, long-term trend. And on a more bearish note, price might fall away from this level of 360 and once again test $3 before perhaps having a brief rally and coming back up to test 360 once again. So these are the two likely scenarios. Obviously, one's more bullish and one's more bearish. I think for price action to exceed this level here of like $4.45, $5, or exceed this level here of $3. So basically, for price to break out of these current upper and lower price parameters, I think there needs to be some sort of catalyst, either a bullish catalyst for the upside or a bearish catalyst to push the price lower. I think overall though, NIO over the next few months is more than likely going to trade in between these areas here. Now, although NIO's Q1 report posted heavy losses at 930 million US, sales were up. And so this might be the bottom in terms of how much NIO is going to post in terms of losses for the rest of this year. And if that's the case, if the Q1 earnings effectively is the largest losses we're going to see, and Q2 the losses are reduced with growing sales, this might be a catalyst to start to push that share price up beyond $5 and towards perhaps $8 by the end of the year. But I think for investor sentiment to change and for that to happen and to get more buyers back into the stock, the Q2 report does need to deliver on the promises, reduce the losses and see the sales growing further. So what's the news saying about NIO since it reported its Q1 report? So an article by Zacks confirmed that NIO introduced the upgraded versions of 4 key models in the first quarter, EC6, ES6, ET5 and ET5T at the end of May, and has recently started deliveries of all 4. It says these models are expected to see their first month of deliveries in June. And on the strength of these new launches, NIO anticipates a year-over-year rise in both June and Q2 deliveries. So that's positive. And also, overall, the company expects June deliveries in the range of 25,000 to 28,000, which is up from the same month in 2024. And for the second quarter overall, this article suggests NIO is expected to deliver between 72,000 and 75,000. So that would be an excellent growth, 25% to 30% in terms of year over year. In another news article, analyst Vincent Sun called the Q1 earnings report disappointing. He remains cautious about NIO's ability to grow sales and cut the losses. And Morningstar cut its fair value estimate to $5 from $5.60. So he's more bearish on NIO. And Barclays maintained their underweight rating of NIO and cut their target to $3 per share from $4 following the earnings report. And in another article, Bernstein analysts offered their thoughts on NIO. They said NIO might not break even before 2027. They went on to say the company's Q1 gross margin was 7.6%, which Bernstein called disappointing, and its vehicle margin dropped to 10.2% from 13.1%. And overall, this analysts think NIO won't break even until 2027. So mixed opinions from various analysts in the news following NIO's Q1 report. What do you think? Let me know in the comments whether you think NIO is going to either move up towards that $5 or perhaps fall further to $3. And do you think it's going to reach profitability by the end of this year, by Q4? So NIO stock was down 2% last week. It's down 15.6 on the month. It's down 27% over the last 3 months. And it's down 20% year to date. So NIO stock is looking bearish. We've got a sea of red on the analytics. And it does look as if now price is moving down to test that $3 support, which could be the bottom, but that's unconfirmed. In this video, I'm going to analyze last week's price action and offer some thoughts on where NIO stock is going to head next. Let's take a look. So looking on the weekly chart for NIO Stock, we can see last week it was down 2% and it's down 15% on the month. And importantly, last week's bar did close underneath this key price level of 361. So it does look as if now, after closing underneath that key price level, the probability is now that the price is going to move down and possibly test this level of $3 again. The first thing it needs to do over the next few weeks is take out this low here of 335. So if it breaks this low here, then the chances are it's going to keep going lower and it's going to come down and test this $3 support once again. Now, if we zoom out on the weekly chart for NIO, we can see this key price level of 360 has been tested in the past. So here there was a price trough during April 2024. Price came back to test this level before taking off, and it did find support there. Again, in August 2024, so almost a year ago now, price did come down to test 360. Once again, it found support and moved up. And here again in the end of August 2024, it also found support. And this was the start of that big surge up to the most previous price peak of 771. So it has found support at 360 on multiple occasions in the past. However, more recently, we can see that it did fall through back in March 2025, found support at $3 and pushed back up, but it couldn't exceed this level here, 444. It found resistance here, couldn't get past that point. And since that time, it has been bearish, it has fallen away. And now, last week, it did fall and close underneath this key level of 360. So the chances are now that price is heading down to $3 again to test this key support level. Now, the big question is $3 the bottom? If it comes down again and tests and moves back up, that could be the case. But we just don't know until price comes to that level and we see the buying and selling interest at that $3 level. Don't forget, if we look at this price action back here, where price came to 360 on multiple occasions, this big reversal bar here would have tricked some buyers into thinking that NIO was on the up and that was the bottom. And once again, it came back to test here on two occasions, a really big bar moving up, really bullish. And of course, some buyers would have bought in during this surge and perhaps made a bit of profit up until this peak here. But of course, we know this was a short-term counter trend. If we zoom out, we can see that the trend will always conform to the longer-term, stronger trend, which, as we know, is trending downwards since January 2021. There is a strong long-term trend in place for NIO, and it is bearish, it is downwards. However, more recently, we can see that this trend is slowing down. It has slowed down and found support here before moving back up, and now it's broken lower. So we might see the same pattern unfold over the next few weeks to months. We might get this sort of double bottom pattern with support at $3. We might get a surge. It might spike back up just as it did here, but then it might fall away again. Don't forget, the long-term trend is still downwards. So we have to expect the short-term trend to conform to the stronger long-term trend. That's how it works. So zooming back in, if we do get this double bottom pattern, if it does come back to test $3 once again and history repeats itself and we get a counter trend, then we might see price move back up to challenge around about 460, perhaps underneath this trend line here. It could be around 460, 450, around this point here. But with that strong long-term trend in place, we should expect it to fall away once again. Now, whether it falls back to $3 or it goes lower, we just don't know yet. Now, zooming out on the weekly chart for NIO, we can see that underneath this level here of $3, the next support level would correspond to this significant low back in July 2019. And that's around about $2.30. So let's mark that up, $2.30. And underneath $2.30, we've also got a significant low here of $2.10. And underneath $2.10, we've got the all-time low of $1.19. So these are the levels underneath the current price action which NIO could fall into. It could fall into and find support. So right now, it looks as if NIO is moving down, and the next level of support would be $3. If it breaks that, then it's looking like it's going to move down to $2.35. This might unfold over the next 3 to 6 months. Now, of course, this is all assuming that the price action conforms to the longer term trend, with no catalyst and no news announcements, no positive changes in NIO's financials. But of course, we know this year could be a key year for NIO. Management is talking about Q4 profitability, but it has discussed these things in the past and hasn't delivered. So if NIO can deliver on the promises, if it can deliver greater sales and reduce those losses to a more manageable amount, and potentially post profit by Q4, or maybe Q1 or Q2 in the next financial year, then that would be the catalyst to start the stock moving. I don't think we're going to see any price surge for NIO, any price increase, until NIO posts improved financial results, and that's going to attract investors back in. I think a lot of long-term investors have been waiting patiently for NIO to turn around, but it just hasn't happened yet. But it could happen in the future. And I think the first stage of building the confidence for investors to perhaps buy more stock of NIO, or older investors to come back in and have the confidence that NIO is going to move up and does offer growth, it's going to have to post more positive financials in its earnings report. And obviously it's got that first opportunity in the Q2 report in a few months' time. Now, if that report shows significant reductions in costs and growing sales, that could really slow down the price decline and it might bottom out. But I think it's only going to be until NIO starts to get close to profitability and the numbers look realistic in that NIO will achieve profitability perhaps in the next quarter, we might see investors come back in quickly to try and buy up the stock, get a great price before that predicted breakout. And for long-term investors wanting to grow their portfolio with NIO in there, I think the key level for me is $7.72. It does correspond to this peak created back in September 2024. So if NIO can improve its financials, investors come back in, and perhaps $3 is the bottom, then we might see price break out something like this. Price might consolidate a while between this 3 and 361 level, perhaps over the next few months. But the moment that positive earnings report shows strong sales, reduced losses, and the steps towards profitability look real and perhaps imminent in the next quarter, this is when we're going to see investors come back in, when they see it's actually going to happen, they're going to hit profitability. And if that does happen, we might get the stock surge immediately, and it might break out above $5 straight away, perhaps reach some resistance at this 771 level before coming back to test 568 and then breaking above the 770 level. So for long-term investors, I think this is a key level. Once price gets above here, you've got that confidence that NIO has cleared out all of this price action here. It's cleared all of it. And the probability is, once it's got above those levels and stopped consolidating, stopped moving downwards, and exceeded this peak here, the probability is that it will keep moving up after this peak. So I think for long-term investors and a low-risk entry, this would be a great level to get in at. So overall, NIO stock is looking bearish right now. It does look as if the probability is it's going to move down and test $3 again. So investors must be patient if they're keen on this stock. As previously mentioned, there is huge upside potential for this stock, but until it posts those numbers that are financially sound, I don't think investors are going to come back in and see value in this stock. If you're holding it, be patient, but of course, you can only hold it so far before you have to cut your losses and move on to another stock. So NIO stock is down around 9% on the month. It's down 11% over the last 3 months and down 25% over the last 6 months. So NIO stock is trending down. It's in a long-term downtrend and it's looking bearish at the moment. But the big question is $3 the bottom for NIO? Is it going to test this again in the next few weeks and start to move up on positive news from NIO's earnings report? In this video, I'm going to talk about the price action of the last few weeks and where price could be heading next. Let's take a look. So you can see on screen, we're looking at the monthly chart for NIO, and we're looking at the long-term trend all the way from January 2021 up until the present day. And you can see on this monthly chart, we've got a confirmed downtrend line, confirming the stock is trending downwards long term. Now in April this year, NIO did trade down and test $3. And at that point, during the month of April, price did reverse. There was some buying interest and price did trade back up to close around $4 from that $3 support line. Now since then, it has fallen away in the last couple of months during May and also during the current month in June with a week to go. So right now it does look as if NIO is trending down, the shorter term trend conforming to the longer term trend. And it looks as if it might go down and test that $3 support level once again. So on the weekly chart now, we can see that the long-term trend is in place. And we can see that key level of $3 corresponding to the recent price trough. And looking back at the historical price action of NIO, it has traded up and down around this $3 level during 2020 and all the way back to 2019. Now looking at key price levels for NIO stock, the first one we can see is the all-time high of around about $66. And this is that significant peak created back at the top of this massive price surge during January 2021, where NIO pushed all the way up from around $3 and maxed out at $66, a very, very bullish run. But since that time, it has been heavily sold off and in a steady decline over the last 4 to 5 years. Underneath that level of 66, you can see NIO did find some temporary support around about $30. You can see here this low here, and also this low came close here, and that was around May 2021. Underneath that level, you can see that price hit resistance here in April 22 and also June 22 around about $25. So let's mark that line up as well. This peak here, which was created in August, July 2023, is around $16. So let's mark that one up. And underneath that level, you can see NIO fell into support during October 2022 at around about 830. So let's mark that level there. And there's also a level back here we can note as well, around about 1070. And that corresponds to this peak, which was created a number of months after the original listing, around 1050. Now underneath 838, we've got this most recent price peak here, around about $7.70, which was created back in September 2024. So this is a key price peak. And also, if you look back further, you can see a lot of the price action during November, October 2023 did trade around about this 750 to 770 level. And also NIO found support around about $7 during May 2023. So I'm going to mark up that peak around about 770. We've also got some trading going on here between the buyers and the sellers around about this price area here of $6. So you can see NIO traded down, it moved sideways, fell into this low here of 350 and then traded back up to find resistance around about $6. So I'll mark that one up as well. You can see as well it did find support around $6 all the way back in 2018. Now underneath $6 we've also got a key price level of $3.60, and you can see NIO traded down and found support in April 2024 into 360, and then it had another go at finding support during September 2024. More recently it did break this key level, but it looks as if there is an element of support here around 360. Now you can see I've already marked up that $3 low, which is very important. Underneath $3 we've got two other levels I want to mark up. This level here, which is around $2, that corresponds to this low back in 2020. And also the final one is the all-time low, which corresponds to the trough back here created in October 2019. That's around $1.20. So based on these key price levels for NIO stock, on the weekly chart, long term, we can currently see that NIO's trading above that key level of $3 and it's underneath that level of 360. Now, if we zoom in on the weekly chart for NIO stock, we can look at this price action in a bit more detail. We can see that since price moved downwards into this trough here, there was a brief counter trend moving back up to around 960 before it fell away and created this trough here, and it found support at this significant level of $3.60. There was a brief rally back up before NIO got sold off again, and once again price traded back down to test this key level of 360. There was a big rally at this point and buyers came back in, taking the price back up to create this significant peak around 770 before NIO got sold off again. And there was a steady fall into this level around here, around $4, before price moved up in a counter trend to create this peak here around 550. Since that time, it got sold off again and price fell through the key level of 360 and it found support at $3. You can see here we've got a reversal bar at that $3 level. So obviously some buyers came back in, seeing value at $3 and bought up NIO stock. Since then, it has reversed. There has been a small rally up to about 450. It couldn't go higher than this. And then it was sold off again, falling through 360. And currently, it looks as if it's looking for support around about 330. So you can see the low here of this bar is about 334. It did move back up to this peak here, and now it looks as if this week it might test 333 again. So you can see I've marked up this level of 333. It could offer some short-term support for NIO in the next few weeks. It has tested it once here 3 weeks ago, and it looks as if it's found some support this week, and there is some price action moving up here. However, based on the overall price action, it does look as if, even if there's a small rally in the next few weeks, that price is moving down and probably is going to come back down and test its $3 once again. And if we zoom out on the weekly chart, we can see that short-term trend is conforming to the longer-term trend, which is down for NIO. So the big question is will NIO stock find support at $3 and then reverse? Is $3 the bottom? Or will it fall further and perhaps fall into the level of $2.12 down here? Right now, if nothing changes and there's no catalyst, it is more likely that the stock will move lower as it trends gradually lower and gets sold off. But we might have a catalyst in the next weeks and months. Perhaps if NIO posts increasing sales and there's some news about significant reductions in the losses and the balance sheet starts to look more positive, there's a real high chance that this stock could find the bottom and then take off and start to move up. I think for anything significant to change with NIO stock price, we really need to see some sort of catalyst come out of the NIO management. And that could be the Q2 earnings report. If those numbers look positive and the bottom line improves significantly, that may attract investors back in to buy up NIO stock at these low levels. And that could mean that $3 could be the bottom for NIO, and buyers come back in at that level and start to take the price higher, with the earnings report showing that steps towards Q4 profitability is realistic. So if that's the case, we might see something like this on the chart. We might see that $3 is the low, then we might get a breakout towards the upside on positive earnings in Q2, perhaps up to $5. It might come back again to test before moving up to challenge this peak here of 770. That's a real possibility. And of course, if the Q3 reports are positive as well, they show increases in profits and a reduction in losses, and that almost that final step towards profitability in Q3, we might see price push even higher. And by Q4, if they post profitability, we might see the price break out and move above this key level over here of $16. So this price action is a real possibility. There's lots of interest in NIO stock, and lots of investors have been waiting patiently for this stock to move up. Don't forget, they're in a hyper-competitive market, but they make great cars. They're expanding their range, and they've got the battery swap stations, looking towards profitability in the future. They do have a USP, and I think NIO's got a real chance of balancing the books this year and rewarding loyal investors. So obviously this would be the ideal scenario for NIO stockholders, but this is all hinged on management improving the bottom line and taking those key steps towards profitability. Of course, on the more bearish side, nothing's going to change. If management can't show that they are reducing losses and the bottom line is improving, that's not going to give investors confidence, and potentially current stockholders who are holding the stock, they might lose confidence, lose patience, and give up altogether. Now, if they sell off and others follow suit, the stock price might fall further. So what might happen is it comes back to test $3, has a brief rally, and then it gets sold off back into this area around $2. And this could be, after the Q2 report, perhaps Q3, if management hasn't shown investors that it is improving and it is delivering on its plans for Q4 profitability. And beyond this, it could fall further. It might have a brief rally back up to $3 before getting heavily sold off, and it could even go down all the way down to the all-time low. This is a real possibility if NIO management cannot deliver on the numbers they promised. And don't forget, this trend, which could unfold over the next 6 months, it is conforming with the longer term trend. So we have to expect the trend to keep going, to keep trending downwards, unless there's a catalyst, unless something significant changes in the world of NIO. And hopefully that can be that NIO management deliver on their promises of profitability by Q4. Let me know what you think in the comments. Are you bullish on NIO by the end of the year? Can they turn a profit and deliver for patient shareholders? Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.